Good morning.
Good morning.
We were gonna all say surprise when you came in, but I think you walked in during prayer, so that might be slightly more awkward. But this morning, for once, and I think probably besides special holidays, the first for once since I've been here for 4 years, we're not in Matthew because we finished it. It only took us 4 years. We're now in 3 John. We're going to go 3 John, 2 John, 1 John. I have a sort of reason for that, but just not in one sermon. Okay, sorry, I just realized that would have just been crazy. But we're going to start 3 John. It'll probably only take us, 4 months. No, I'm just joking, 4 weeks. And that's actually a little more, probably closer to the truth. But we're going to read the text from John chapter 3 as a whole. But I'm only going to pull out the first 8 verses. But it's 15 verses, so we can read the whole chapter. So 3 John chapter 1, but there's only one chapter in the book, so there you go. Starting with, obviously, verse 1. The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that in all respects you may prosper and be in good health, just as your soul prospers. For I was very glad when brothers came and testified to your truth, that is, how you are walking in truth. I have no greater joy than this, to hear of my children walking in the truth. Beloved, you are acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brothers, and especially when they're strangers. And they have testified to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of God. For they went out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support such men, so that we may be fellow workers with the truth. I wrote something to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first among them, does not accept what we say. For this reason, if I come, I will call attention to his deeds, which he does, unjustly accusing us with wicked words, and not satisfied with this, he himself does not receive the brothers either, and he forbids those who desire to do so and puts them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. The one who does good, he's of God. The one who does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. And we add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true. I had many things to write to you, but I'm not willing to write them to you with pen and ink. But I hope to see you shortly, and we will speak face to face. Peace be to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends by name.
Amen.
Yeah. Father God, we thank you that you love us, and we thank you that you allow us to work with people to accomplish great things for your name. Mm-hmm. And God, while we may be small and we may be by all kinds of reckonings insignificant, we know that everything we do for your kingdom and for your name matters. And it matters immensely, and it can change the whole world if we would just be faithful. God, help us to be faithful. Help us to love you enough that when we get old and we can't do the work, that we would pray and support and mentor those who would. And if we are still in the age in which we can physically get out and beat the bushes, so to speak, God, help us to be just exuberant to do that. Help us to do everything we do for your glory and with your energy and with your might. God, help us to love you and to love each other. And in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So John is writing from Ephesus, which is the first mega church that there was. I don't know its numbers, like I haven't Googled their records yet, because Google's got everything. But what we do know is that Ephesus became a hub, and it became one of the larger churches, and that's probably due to the fact that Paul planted it. But also, when you have the last of the apostles who had spent time with Jesus, that being John, has set up himself to kind of keep shop there. This is where he is now retiring. And this is where he is now spending his time. And I'm going to explain what I mean by retiring in just a second, because it's kind of my dream. I'm just going to be really honest. Not retirement, but this kind of retirement. But there are 4 men in this letter. They're allusions to others, obviously. But there are essentially 4 people. So I'm just going to give you my outline for the entire book in the broad sweeping of it. And Dennis, this is partially for you. So it starts with the chief, John, or the elder. I'll explain why I call him the chief in a second, or you'll just catch on. But it also, the commendation of Gaius, the condemnation of Diotrephes, and then the commissioning of Demetrius. So those are for my alliteration friend there. But also, the reason that I'm calling him the chief is, as the elder, and I think by this time he's probably the last one left alive of the apostles. He is about the only one, according to church history anyways, that gets to die of old age. He sets up shop in Ephesus, and this is, as he is retiring, what he does is he realizes, well, as an older guy, as an elder, I don't have the energy, I don't have the ability to travel place to place to place to place to place to place to place. So he sits down and he begins to mentor people. So all of these young pastors, like myself would be here, go, that's a really smart minister guy. He knows what he's doing. He spent time with Jesus. This seems like a really... So they would go to him and they would spend time with him there being mentored. And then when he was done mentoring them, or he thought that they had reached a point, he would send them out. And if you read some early church history, you'll notice that there are several guys that end up being very prominent in the church, great early leaders that really fight for the truth and write a lot of good things, come out of this. And so the first thing that we see here is that John never actually retires. Now, I'm not anti-retirement. I'm just meaning that, and this is my dream, is that as he gets old, instead of just sitting around and going, well, I can't really go door to door anymore, I got bad knees, I've got, and he's clearly going to have some problems, because that whole boil him in oil thing of church history is right. It's probably going to take a toll on your body. So he's been through a lot. But instead of just, well, I'm just old and decrepit and I'll just go sit over here, he starts mentoring the young guys, which, as a young guy, let me tell you, that's gold. When you can get somebody who has been there and knows what they're doing and knows what they did and can look at it and go, well, this was good, that was stupid. That whole time that we said, Jesus, let's call down fire here and just destroy these people, that was a bad idea. Don't go down that route. Sons of thunder, that's the guy we're talking about. But he begins to realize, I have sway because I've earned it. He's earned the right as an elder to help guide people. So this letter, in its fullness, is a correction and a don't forget about this guy who's coming. The last guy we mentioned, Demetrius, is a traveling, we're going to call him a missionary, church planner, one of that kind of a vein. And as a result, he would go from place to place, and we'll explain this more in detail as we go. But churches would actually help him complete each leg of where he's going. And that's part of what we find here. And we're going to look at the 3 characteristics now, enough of John, but to look at the 3 characteristics of Gaius. And they, also for Dennis's sake, are alliterated with a C. We're going to look at his character, we're going to look at his conduct, and we're going to look at his care. Now these are things that we're going to artificially separate, because to talk about them, it's easier sometimes. But we all know that how I am character-wise, who I really am, will show up in my everyday. If I am a jerk when I behave in public, it's because I am a jerk. It is not, well, I've really got a heart of gold, I just treat people poorly. No. It doesn't work that way. Whatever we are shows up in our life. So to separate the two and to say, well, his character is good, but his conduct's horrible, doesn't work. And we're going to look at that. But to talk about them, we're going to pull them apart a little bit. And who we are matters in what we do as well. So it's going to be very important for us to remember who we are, if I can quote my father. But in verse 2, John calls Gaius beloved. This is a very strong term of endearment. It's not just friend. It's not just somebody that I care about. This is that really deep, intimate, what you call somebody who has been your best friend for like the last 40 years, has wept with you, cried with you, rejoiced with you, that is tight with you, that if you lost them, it would be like losing a sibling. That's beloved. This is that most affectionate term possible. You don't get more intimate than beloved. So this is now the elder looking at one of his understudies. This is the only place we know of Gaius from, that we're sure of anyways. There are some other Gaiuses which may or may not be and probably aren't. But here, this is a guy who he has clearly poured his heart into and probably has actually converted due to the I have no greater joy than to know that my children walk with the Lord verse. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. But he is deeply, deeply happy about this. As he looks at a guy who he's poured a lot into, and now to be able to say, man, I see where this got us. This was great. While he's, I sometimes wonder, because I've had the privilege of walking with some younger Christians in life, and I always wonder, what you're going to impact do. Like down the road, as you develop, as you mature, as you get more than a year of salvation under your belt, I wonder what is it that you're going to accomplish. And I wonder about this sometimes. I have the benefit of meeting a lot of people who are in ministry, thanks to the fact that I work at a seminary. That kind of helps. A lot of exposure in that. But sometimes you hear and you look down the road, and especially now with the book of Faith all over the place, and you go, wow, that guy really has just done all kinds of great things. And then sometimes you just go, ooh, I blew it or they blew it, one of the two right there. But here, I find this to be the most interesting way of phrasing this. And some people think that as a result of how the rest of this goes, that Gaius was actually sick. Because he says, I pray that in all aspects you may prosper and be in good health, just as your soul does. So the thought is that maybe he was sick. But anyways, what John says to him is, I hope your health is as good as your spiritual life. And I wonder if we were to pray that same thing for most of the people that we know, how many people we put in the ER? I mean, just to be really blunt, because I'm more Midwestern than I am Southern now, apparently. But, this is what John is saying. I know from what I've heard of you that you are outstanding spiritually. I hope your health is just the same. This would be a curse if it were the other way around. If he had said this for Diotrephe, who loves to be first, then it's a curse. But it's a blessing for Gaius. It is a blunt statement of, you are proving yourself to be a man of God. You are proving yourself to be somebody who is doing the work of God. And you are proving yourself to be somebody who supports the work of God. I hope that the rest of your life is just as good as your spiritual life. He is asking God to bless him with the same health physically, which again may indicate that he's sick. But he's asking God to bless him with the same health physically, and yes, financially, as he is spiritually. Because with those two things, if you have a guy who is that much in love with God, that much in love with the church, and he has the health to do things, he's going to do things. It is a boon to the kingdom. But it doesn't just stop there. But I mean, that's a pretty good statement of character. When somebody can say, I hope your health is as good as your spiritual life, and mean it as a blessing. Because again, I think sometimes we might say this under our breath to people that we don't like. And now you can say, I'm just praying something from the Bible. Don't. Just joking. Context. But that's his character. But here we also see his conduct. For I was very glad when brothers came and testified to your truth. That is, how you're walking in the truth. And we want to be very careful with this phrase because we don't want it to go wonky. But what is happening in the early church is that you normally have a group of believers in a particular spot, aka the church. And because there's not a national association of churches, they don't have a cooperative program. I like the cooperative program, okay? I'm pro-cooperative program. But they didn't have that in the early church. What they had was a missionary that would be sent from particular churches. It was just the way in which they did it, which did limit, I guess, how many you could send, which is why we have the cooperative program, blah, 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 blah. Let that bus go. Happily talk about the CP later on if you want to. I've had to study that thing more than I care to. But in the grand scheme of things, these churches were sending out missionaries. And just like when we send out missionaries, when certain people who are our missionaries in certain countries that we're not allowed to talk about show back up in the States, I almost forgot that we throw this on YouTube. Sorry. Then when they come back, we want to hear what they're doing. Yeah. We want to celebrate with them. Well, this is the same thing. When churches were sending out their missionaries from Ephesus, which is, again, the megachurch, so they can send out a lot. When they would come back, they would be like, man, we were just over talking with Gaius. He helped us do all of this. And as they would begin to give their reports and be accountable to the people who sent them, it was, he helped us out a lot. I mean, he would give us a place to stay. He'd give us food to eat. He'd give us some money for our next leg. He'd tell us where the safe spots were. He'd keep us from being, waylaid and hijacked, which are all very important things. The ancient world, unlike now, you don't stay in a hotel. If you at all love Jesus. Because hotels and brothels are the same thing. You get a bed and a girl. And probably all the stuff that goes along with that, if you get what I mean. So this is not somewhere where Christians can go. It's not somewhere where good, upstanding people, even if they're just moral, end up. So there are no Best Western, Super 8s, Holiday Inn, whatever. There are just brothels. So if you are a traveling missionary, this is a problem. Because you can't check in to there. So you depend on the kindness of those who are in the city. There's actually an ancient practice that's still sort of in play now, where you would just go to the city town, into the center square, and you would wait until somebody would invite you into their house. And if the people of that town were very hospitable, then you would have a place to stay for a little bit. And they would feed you, and they would protect you, and they would kind of be your advocate for the time that you were in the city. And that was, at most, typically 3 days, unless somebody was really generous, and then they could let you hang out for a little bit longer. Culturally, it was a 3-day gig. But this was just how the ancient world worked. Because you didn't want somebody to have to spend the night over there in that place if they didn't have to. And it was all cutthroats and thieves who stayed there. So good, respectable people and Christians, because not all respectable people are Christians, but in the process of things, Gaius is one of those guys who would walk by and say, hey, you're a missionary, you need a place to stay, come stay in my house, which was a financial burden. And I don't mean to equate everything down to the dollar, but those of you who have housed people in your homes know that it costs a little bit if you're going to feed 5 or 6 people, 3 times a day. Well, that starts to actually get a little bit work-related. It gets to be a little bit of a financial strain. So here's a guy who is clearly sacrificing from what he has so that these missionaries can do the work in his city. And beyond that, when they're done, they can go on. So he is helping not only his own people, but these people as well. And so when they come back, they testify of his truth. And this is the part that I don't want to allow it to get wonky. It's not that Gaius has a gospel, John has a gospel, Mary has a gospel, don't you want a gospel too? There's a song in my head, and it's the old Honda song. But anyways, that's beside the point. This is not that. What is being said here is how he is living is in accord with the gospel. It's the way of saying your conduct matches your gospel and matches the gospel. We can clearly see when we hear reports about you that you get Jesus. We clearly hear that you got what it means to be a follower. We can clearly see from all of the reports of what you're doing that you get it. We clearly understand that you love Jesus because of how you behave. And your truth, what you're demonstrating to the world, is volumes loud. You are a billboard for everything that is wonderful, good, and right. Pure, good, and holy, honorable. Think on those things. Gaius gets it. That's what John is saying here. He's saying, man, you are a great billboard for what it means to be a Christian. And I wonder what people will say when they filter through us. When they run into you, and then they meet somebody over, because the whole 7 degrees of separation, or 3 degrees, or however many degrees there are between you and the people, that I meet in the grocery store. And you drop somebody's name. Oh yeah, I know so and so. I go to church with them. Do they go, oh, because I'm from the land of cultural Christianity, right? And I know that there are some times where I mention in my beloved promised land of Virginia somebody's name that I went to church with, and I could just watch people go, oh. And I think to myself, how horrible did we just muck that up? We gotta knock that off. And I wonder sometimes when you mention my name in public, like, I hope people go, I know that guy. Yeah, as opposed to, oh. I remember that time when he was in here and he yelled at us. I don't yell at people because of this, actually. But it sits in my head, and it reminds me all the time that how I behave says volumes and is the real proof of if I love Jesus. If I love Jesus, if I really, really, honestly love Jesus, then I will behave like Jesus. If I don't love Jesus, then I behave like I want to, which is normally a big jerk. If I didn't have Jesus, I'd be a jerk, just so we're clear. Just laying that out there. But I got Jesus, so I'm not as big of a jerk. And I'm working on the parts that I still need to work on. Right? Martin Luther once said, the theologian, not Junior, once said that every minister should have a wife if for no other reason than to keep him humble. So my wife sometimes, very nicely, because she's a wonderful individual, reminds me of the things that I still need to change. And thanks for that, by the way. Because Lamentations chapter 2, verse 14, if people don't give you the truth, you can't change. And then you're just condemning people. By the way, we're in Lamentations tonight at our Bible and Buffet. Just a plug, you should come. But anyways, he then goes on to say, you're walking in it. You are consistently walking out the tenets of Christianity. And this makes him happy. And I love this about John. If you read, and we will, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, you'll notice that joy and love and unity are really big themes. And he means by that proper love, by the way, not the redefined love of our culture that's very hippie-ish, Not hippie love, but actual die on the cross for you love, is here. And he says in verse 4, I have no greater joy than this, to hear my children walking in the truth. This is, you are refreshing to an old man's soul. There are those times in which I could see it on my parents' and my grandparents' face when they would come home and be like, hey, I heard about you today. I was like, you're smiling, so this is okay. Because my dad was one of those guys that just, I swear, knows everybody. What? They're from 6 hours away. Well, we were talking and you came up. Okay. Just weird stuff. I think this is the way parents work. I don't know. Maybe there's a school or something I missed of how to know people that my kids are connected to. If you have that number, let me know later. But in the course of things, this is, John is saying, man, you are refreshed. Here I am. I can't do what I used to do. I'm just stuck mentoring people. And I'm sure he said stuck. But here, man, when I hear that you've got it, and you're running with it, and that Christianity will at least last another generation, it is just refreshing to who I am. So here, Gaius, just by doing what he's supposed to be doing, is refreshing and encouraging the guy who taught him. Because he calls him my child, which is normally a term in Scripture of either I led you to Christ or I've mentored you along the way. We've put in the time together. There are those people who I've spent more time than with others throughout the course of my life, who I really do call my own, who I really am just that invested in what happens with their life. And that it is, and I say this, and I mean it, the same as I wonder and watch my own kids' life. Like my two biological fun offspring back here. There are those people that I work with that I look at and I go, man, you're either going to turn the world upside down or you're going to set it on fire. It's either going to go really good or really poorly with you. And I wonder, and it's refreshing to me when they go out and they do stuff and then we get to talk about it and it's like, yeah, that's much better. Turn it upside down. Put it back the way it should be, as opposed to just being another holy terror. And they're just, it's refreshing, and it always makes me go, yeah, this is what I want to do with my life. I'm glad that God in his, really weirdness, can I say weirdness? I just did, so we're going to stick with it. In the insanity of things said, oh yeah, the kid who's dyslexic, can't read, and doesn't like people, we're going to make him a minister. Because that makes sense. But it works. Amen. Because God uses the simple things to confuse the wise. And that's hot. Exhibit A. Okay? Because this is not what I planned on doing with my life, but this is what God planned. Mm-hmm. So this is one of those things where I hope that then when it goes back to the people who mentored me, like Dr. J, not the basketball player, the actual pastor, his name was Jordan, but which is now funny that I say that, and I haven't caught that before. And other guys who really poured into me and taught me things that I needed to know. Like, I hope that they go, that kid brings me joy. That kid brings me a bit of refreshing. When I hear, man, that kid makes me happy. And it's the same thing. And I know this is going to sound a little bit weird because I'm not really older than almost any of you. But there's a certain bit of, I get why John says children. Mm-hmm. I think of you in this way. And it makes me very happy when I go out in the community and I name drop somebody, either on purpose or just because I talk. This is now apparently what I do. And somebody goes, yeah, I know that person. There's a certain bit of, yep, that's one of mine. And then I have to be careful because pride goes before the fall. And I'm clumsy enough on my own, if I can just say it that way. And then I look and I'm like, man, this is great. And I get really encouraged by your successes. And I get really saddened by the times in which we get it wrong. And there's this constant, so I get it. There is an encouragement that you get from people as you watch them all along the long haul. So this is just one of those things. So get it right so that I can be happy, right? That's what no, I'm just joking. But get it right because it comes back to the name.
Amen.
Beloved, you are acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brethren, and especially when they're strangers. It's one thing when we take care of each other. Because I know you, you know me, I know your kids, you know my kids, I know some of your grandkids. I've got the adopted grandkid, but other than that, so much for that. But there is something very much to be said of when we support and take care of people that we don't know. Mm-hmm. And strangers in this case is people like Demetrius, who are coming with normally a letter of, hey, I'm connected with so-and-so, and they're sending me. Can you help me out? Can you give me a little bit? It'd be like if somebody down in, Kentucky were to send somebody out this way and say, hey, we like this kid. He's in Kansas City to do some ministry. Can you just watch out for him? Well, okay. We don't know him. Mm-hmm. We know people who know him. But in the process, if we take care of him so that he can do gospel stuff, mm-hmm. and we provide for the things that he needs to, then there is something to really be said about how much we love Jesus. Mm-hmm. Because again, even pagans will take care of pagans. We'd like to say, well, only Christians are nice to people. But that's simply not true. We all know that the outside world will take care of those that belong to them. Mm-hmm. Every pagan takes care of their own family. I mean, that's not, oh, you take care of your mom when she gets sick. Great. It's what everybody does. But it says something different if I take care of your mom when she gets sick. Mm-hmm. It says something different if I take care of the homeless guy that I don't know. That's what we're getting at here. And in his conduct and in his care, Gaius is taking in people and he's helping them do what they're supposed to do, even when he doesn't know them. And they testify to your love before the church. The church here is likely the church in Ephesus, but it also may be wherever they're going. Because if you travel from place to place, you mention, hey, I got here because that guy down, a couple of towns over, well, he loaned me his mule, or his horse, or whatever, his chariot, though I doubt Gaius owns a chariot. And I got here because Gaius helped me get here. And now that I'm here, let me tell you about Jesus. That's the kind of stuff that happens. And the beauty of this, and they have testified to your love before the church, you will do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of God. You do the right thing. But it's also in the tense in Greek, which says you did the right thing, you're doing the right thing, and there's a part of that speech of, I'm anticipating that you're going to continue to do the right thing. Now, some of that may or may not be a little bit of leverage by John, because he is sending somebody, the letter carrier here, Demetrius, who is one of these people. So it might be a little bit of a, hey, keep doing the right thing. Here's the guy holding the letter. Kind of a thing. But at the same time, this is the expectation. I've clearly watched you do the right thing. I hear that you're doing the right thing. I have every confidence that you're going to keep doing the right thing, which is helping the gospel go forward. You have aided all of this. So then he goes on, though, for they went out for the sake of the name. Now, this is the big deal. They're not going out because they want to be the next John the Elder. I about said Billy Graham, but then I realized that the timeline would just be weird and off that way. They're not going out because they want to themselves have a great name. Because they want to be famous preachers. As a matter of fact, if we got in Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine, go back, that would be the most stupidest idea. If you wanted to become famous, known, and rich, and live in the lap of luxury, don't become a first century pastor. Don't do it. As a matter of fact, don't do it now. But in first century world, they just killed Christ. This is the same generation that killed the Messiah. You don't get rich by going to people saying, you know the Messiah that you killed? Yeah, that's the same one we're preaching. They throw you in jail, they beat you up, Peter. They also throw rocks at you, Stephen. These aren't, get rich quick schemes. Now, in the ancient world, there were several people who did, who, as they traveled, they would actually brag as philosophers that they could fleece the populace. That's not what's going on here. And there are great safeguards against that here. And part of the reason why, just as a little historical note, that you would help support the missionaries, and for the same reason Paul was a tent maker, is because Gentiles don't pay their priests in temples. It was one of those things that therefore made it really only the profession of the wealthy. They all had other jobs. They were all bivocational, but that's the pagans. Keep that in mind. I don't care that I am. I'm not. I just don't want to mix the two. Okay, I'm not pagan. Okay, good. But in the process, they were all otherwise employed, and they would just spend their time in the temple because it was a way of, I got a tip for this. So it was a way of getting a little extra income with not a lot of work. But they didn't pay salary-wise. So if Christian missionaries came into a very pagan culture and said, well, you've got to pay us to teach you, then that, wait a minute, we're not buying into that. So it became a stumbling block. So Paul and early church missionaries just said, well, we'll just support ourselves, and people who love Jesus will help support what we do. That's the way in which this worked. So here, as they come back, they're sending them on a manner worthy of God for the sake of the name, so that Jesus' name gets known. They're making a big deal about Christ and a little deal of themselves. That's the way this works. He must increase, I must decrease. That's what this is about. They're about that name, not their own name, like Diotrephes. And we're gonna look at him next week, and we'll throw rocks at him as we throw rocks at ourselves, because that's the point here. But this is what he's also gearing up for. He is knowing full well that he's about to go to talk to and talk about the guy who is an arrogant, self-loving, it's got to be about me and my plan and all about me. It's all about me. There's a song that's in there rambling around. But How Great I Am was Diotrephes' theme song. Not how great you are, but how great I am. So he's not about the name, he's about his name. So here, Gaius is helping those people who are about the name, which is obviously the name of Christ. So then he goes on, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. So the back history there. Therefore, we ought to support such men. We should support those people who are doing actual ministry. Now, this is not a blanket call to be sheep and just, to every beggar or everybody who comes through to throw your wallet at them. But this is when you see this person is doing actual gospel, true, orthodox ministry, we will support you how we can. That's what that amounts to. And why is it that we should do that? So that we may be fellow workers in or with the truth. Because every time that Gaius sent out somebody and said, I've got an extra $20, here you go. Now you can go, you're going up north? Okay, cool. Well, Gaius may never get up north. There are countries in this world that I will never put my boots on the ground. There are places like the country of Chad, like the country of India, like the country of Antarctica. I don't. That's going to be awkward in a minute. Wherever it is that I'm never going to go. And I know that I'm never going to get there. And I have, right now, no intention of going to some of those places. But there are people who I've prayed for who have been in those countries.
Yeah.
There are those people who we support as a group who are in places that we're not going to mention because this will go on YouTube later. It's for my sake, not yours. But whatever and do in that country, because we have prayed for them, because we have invested resource into them, whatever converts they have in those countries, whatever pastor school they start in that, and whatever they do, we're sharing in that. That's the way this works. All of those IMB missionaries that do great things, and we go, man, that's awesome. Congratulations, you're doing an awesome work. All of those people that you know, that you've prayed for, and they finally got Jesus, and then they finally led their families to Jesus, congratulations, you've led their families to Jesus. This is how that works. And if you think about it, sometimes we think about it on the grand scale, and we go, wow, Billy Graham led thousands upon thousands upon thousands to Christ, and then those, and the trickle-down effect, we're like, oh, that's going to be a waiting line in heaven. But the same is also true if you think about who led Billy Graham to Christ. I think it was Charles Spurgeon who got God because he went to church on a snowy day, and the pastor was like, it's too snowy, I'm not going to church, or was sick or whatever. And as this young kid comes in, he gets, because some layperson stood up and said, we're here at church, we're going to study, and did this really poor by C.H. Spurgeon's statement, unless I've mixed, anyways, and got Jesus because of that. Well, think about all of that influence. It's not just what you do, it's about the kingdom. It is about supporting those who do the kingdom work. Because in doing so, I may never get to do that ministry, but Christ is doing that just the same as he's doing this one. Yeah. And every time that we pray for somebody, every time that we invest our resources to people, be that money, time, material, whatever, we participate and we become co-laborers in that. There is a huge need that missionaries have for people who are just willing to pray for them. You may never get a passport and go overseas. But if you will just simply invest the time to pray and to care for and to minister to those that do, you are in the accounting of God. God's accounting is slightly different than ours, thank goodness. So all of those people who you have as a church body, and I love actually hearing the stories from this, currently prayed for, or in the past that you have prayed for, that's what this is. You're co-laboring with them. All of the gospel that they do, you've done. When people leave here to go minister places, congratulations. You've furthered the kingdom, whether you physically go with them or not. And that's the high five, because I've got the wrong word in my head. Commendation, had to look at it, sorry. That John is giving to Gaius. Your influence is bigger than you think it is. And the same is true about you. If you love Jesus enough that it shows up in your life and it shows up in your care, then you have done more for the kingdom than you will ever know. There are a lot of reasons why a lot of pastors shouldn't be the success that they are or were. But it's because other people came through and said, you know what, we're just going to pray for you. If you don't like your pastor, pray for him. If you like your pastor, pray for him. Especially if your pastor is me. But this is that notion. All of the great mighty men that I've ever read their biographies of, they all come back and say, there's this really insignificant person that you'll never know about except for the fact that I'm now telling you the story, that they prayed for me, they mentored me, they stuck with me. They went to the town in front of me and would pray until I got there, and then would pray through the time that I was there, and then they'd go to the next one. And that's really why this was successful. Well, all of those people who are insignificant, anonymous, and the world is like, who is that person? When they get to heaven, will have just as long of a line as the Billy Grahams of the world. So the question is, are you going to be like Gaius and put your resources, both what you do and who you support, into building the kingdom? Or are you going to be like the jerk who is all about himself? Because that's the choice. That's where we're going to be. We're either going to be kingdom workers or we're going to be selfish workers. Or as Corrie ten Boom says, you're either a missionary or you're a mission field. Take your pick. Which one are we going to be individually? Which one are we going to be corporately? Father God, I